Mm. Alrighty, so that was very weird. Hopefully, you guys will be able to hear me. And you have no idea what I'm talking about, so I'm going to tell you. But before I do, let's say I am your host, and I want to welcome you to the Reset Room. I'm Tennille M. Jackson, your host and transformational empowerment architect. So, what just happened? I forgot to put my earbud in, and I was going live. I'm hitting the live button. I'm like, oh, wait, let me pop my earbud in. And so as I'm doing that, I'm hearing myself from a previous show is going on. So clearly there's some other device that's going on. You talking about when life forces you to reset. But that's what we're going to be talking about because so many times that's what happens. Life is life and all the time, and you just have to roll with it. Like, the unfortunate truth is that many times we feel like we're going to always know what's going to happen. We feel like that we can sit down and we can plan out for every situation. But the fact of the matter is that very rarely, or I'll say more times than not, will you encounter a situation that you did not plan for, but you have to find a way to keep going and to make the best out of it. And so we're going to jump into that topic when life forces you to reset. But right before we do, I want to encourage you, if you have not already connected with me, to please do so across social media platforms. You can find and follow me at my name is Tennille. So whether it be Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, you can find me at my name is Tennille. And once you get to YouTube, do me a quick favor, take that extra second and click on that subscribe button, and I will be grateful to you. But let's go ahead and let's jump into today's show, when life forces you to reset. So, first of all, again, remember we talked about what a reset is, and that's basically when you need to make an adjustment of some type, right? So, like, you need to set it again. That's the literal definition, to set again. So, think about that alarm clock. You had it set for 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock came and you were not ready to get up. So you needed to reset. So just like our alarm clocks, there will be times in our lives where situations occur where we need to reset, meaning we thought we knew what would happen when that moment met us. We thought we would be ready to go when that moment knocked on our door, but the moment came. The moment came and we were not ready for it, right? And so, just obviously, what you hear in this title when it says when life forces you to reset, is the understanding that resets can be proactive or reactive. Resets can be voluntary or mandatory, right? So there will be times where you can proactively assess your life and you can determine, oh, you know what, I need to make this adjustment. But then there are times when life says, you know what, you're going to adjust, okay? Like, here's a situation that's thrown at you, adjust to it. You didn't think that you'd be able to make this, figure it out. What you gonna do, sink or swim, right? And so that's the category of situations and circumstances that we're going to be talking about today. Those situations that you did not plan for. I don't care how brilliant you are, I don't care how many resources you have. Like, life has a way of lifing. You know what I mean? It knocks on your door, and sometimes it knocks down your door, and you were not planning for it. And so throughout this, because I genuinely have no clue how this podcast is going to go. And many times that's what happens. Like I start out with a topic. If you guys have not noticed by now, I am always impromptu, is always ad lib. Like there are no scripts at all. It's like here's a topic that hits me, let's go with it. And it could literally be mid sentence where I thought we were going this way, and then I end up going a totally different direction. And so, what I do feel the need to say right now is there may be things that I make lighthearted that are genuinely serious. And I do that because that is my coping mechanism. Okay. So sometimes life can be so heavy. And if you just stay in the heaviness of it, then it will overwhelm you to whatever the extent can be. Like sometimes you have it where you can cut off the overwhelm, but sometimes it becomes a slippery slope. And so, what I have learned in all of my years of living is that I need to be able to have some type of coping mechanism when life starts to life, right? And so, depending on what I'm going to end up talking about, if it's something, you might hear it and you're like, why is she laughing about this? So do understand that that is my personal mechanism to cope. Not that whatever the situation is funny, but it's just sometimes you have to laugh to keep from crying. You know what I mean? And so in either case, before we jump into this, again, be sure if you tune into this live or even if you listen to it, watch it on replay, that you do comment, you do engage. I do my best to check back and see if there are comments made, and I do try to interact because I appreciate your engagement. And so, again, let's talk about when life forces you to reset. And I know that we all have been there. I don't care what your status is. So, whether you are a celebrity, whether you are an average Joe, like at the end of the day, life has no respect of persons. Hardship has no respect of persons. And the reason why I say hardships is because very rarely does it happen when something good occurs that you're angry or frustrated about having to make adjustments. And so, just by listening to the title, When Life Forces You to Reset, that means you didn't want to do it. That was not on your plan. That was not in the works. That was not something that you were looking to have happen. However, things happen. So that means that you had to make the necessary adjustments. And so I want to just talk about some of those situations, and I'll give some examples first. So like let's say if you or if you're married or you're in a relationship, you or your significant other are the primary breadwinners for your household, and everything is going well with your job until it's not, right? You didn't have a warning. You didn't know that the plant was going to close, that the pink slip was going to come, yet and still you wake up one day unemployed. That is a prime example of when life forces a reset. You know what I mean? Because it changes everything around you. Another situation could be where your child, if you are a parent, and your child finds themselves in trouble, and more specifically in trouble with the law. It has nothing to do with how well you raised them. These are situations where you never would have thought that you'd find yourself sitting in these shoes. You know what I mean? And so that child calls you and they are now in jail and they need bail money, and you don't have any savings. So now what do you do? That's an example. It's like it could be a health situation. You thought you were the healthiest of persons, right? Like when you go to the doctor, all your numbers look good. You don't have high blood pressure. You don't have high cholesterol. You're not obese. So everything looks good. But then you turn around and you've had a stroke, or you've had a heart attack, or you've had some major situation happen to you where now you're hospitalized, or maybe you're not even, well, no, if it's major, you're hospitalized, regardless for the length of time. But you look up and your entire life has changed, and it has nothing to do with how you cared for yourself because you did all of the right things. So, all of those are examples of when life forces you to reset. It's nothing that you did wrong. In fact, you did everything that you could possibly do to make sure that you never ended up there. You did all the right things, yet some way, somehow, you still found yourself in this moment. And so these are the moments that we are going to talk about today. I don't know that I'm going to address all three, but I will definitely talk about one. And believe it or not, I will not talk about the health situation, because if you've been listening to me over these past podcasts, I've shared some personal moments of health issues, because the unfortunate truth is that I have many. I have many of them, but I do not always share everything. And so, unless we get to it, unless time allows for it, I probably will not discuss what happens with the latter, right? I'm going to actually start with what happens when your finances take a toll for the worse, right? Because I feel like that is probably one of the biggest things that, regardless of how old you are, regardless of what race you are, what ethnicity you are, I think that financial situations, that is something that we universally understand, right? So whether you're talking about dollars, pounds, pesos, euros, when your money get affected, okay, like those are some things that definitively causes, it forces you to reset. It's been a lot of times where, I am not a millionaire, but there have been times in my life where I was more comfortable than less comfortable. You know what I mean? There's a scripture in the Bible where Paul talks about how he's learned whatsoever state that he's in to be content. And I would definitely encourage us to take that mindset. And again, I'm not forcing you to be a believer and read the Bible, but I'm just saying, listen to what he says. And that concept is something that would help us, because when life starts life in, you got to figure out what you're going to do. And sometimes it's not a quick solution. Sometimes it's not as simple as going to get that $10 million in your left sock. You know what I mean? Like sometimes there are situations that occur and you're like, wait, what in the world am I going to do now? And so if you are accustomed to only having the best, only living at the top, being, you know what I mean? Then when that happens to you, when a situation happens that causes you to go from the top to the bottom, from the best to the worst, and you had no preparation for it, then that really can affect you mentally, emotionally. It can affect you holistically. I think about the Great Depression, right? And for those of you who are not, if you don't know what the Great Depression is, I want to bring up the actual facts for when this time was. Hold on one second. So the Great Depression, this happened. It was a severe worldwide economic turndown from 1929 to 1939. So it happened over the span of a decade, and it was triggered by the 1929 stock market crash, characterized by high unemployment. It said it peaked at 25% in the US, but you also had bank failure and reduced production. It said it led to widespread poverty, social upheaval, and a global shift toward protectionism, with its end marked by the mobilization for World War II. So here is the point that I'm making. You had this was not something that the world at that time was prepared for. There was no social media, there was no internet, so there was no way in 1929. I'm hoping, was it even telephones by then? Because you might have still been using like telegrams. Hold on, give me 1 second. When were telephones invented? Hold on. Okay, so I'm a little late, y'all. It was 1876, but it's still 1929. So telephones have been out for about 50 years. So we don't know what version of telephone. But the point that I'm making is this: like, there was no way that people knew to prepare for this Great Depression. Even if you had had a telegram or a phone call, there was nothing that gave them to know for the next 10 years, the world as you know it is going to be turned upside down. You know what I mean? And so there were a lot of people who had money, and then when the banks closed, because the banks failed, right? So when all of this happened, where's my money? If this is the type of lifestyle that I'm used to living, and now I can't live this type of lifestyle anymore, what do I do? And people who just barely were making it, you went from that to nothing at all. You know what I mean? So when it talks about how it ended in poverty, a lot of people that had money, they went from having money to not having money. People genuinely did not know how to bounce back from that. And I remember, whether it's true or not, I remember hearing the stories of how people were jumping out of windows, and they just really, it was kind of like this. What's the word when you have the massive, like delirium type thing, where everybody's just kind of, they're losing it, and it became contagious, and the point is, people just genuinely didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to reset. How do I bounce back from this? If I've lost every penny that I had, I earned this, I saved this, and I was holding on to this for a specific time period. Now that time period has gotten here, and there is nothing that I have in reserves anymore. So how am I going to live from day to day, right? Now, that was 1929 to 1939. Do you guys, let's fast forward some, about what, 70 years? Do you guys remember when we had that situation with the recession? Let me see. I think the year was maybe 2008. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna look up when was the last recession. Give me one quick second. Okay, wait a minute. So I don't even want to say last one, because that's something totally different. Because let me see. Because we just actually had one 2020, so we're gonna come on that one too. That's crazy. Okay, so this was called the Great Recession. So the Great Recession happened from 2007 to 2009, and this says this was the most severe U.S. shutdown. I'm sorry, let me read it right. The most severe U.S. economic downturn since the Great Depression. So I'm finna connect all the dots for y'all. So the Great Depression, I just told you about, 1929 to 1939. Then, some 70 years after the Great Depression ended in 2007, for those next 2007, 2008, 2009, it says that this was the most severe economic downturn since the Great Depression. It was triggered by the collapse of the housing bubble, subprime mortgage defaults, and a crisis in the financial system due to complex mortgage backed securities and derivatives. It led to massive job losses, a significant decline in the GDP, the gross domestic product, and a huge loss of household wealth with lasting impacts on employment, poverty, and mental health. Um, so here is the thing. I remember where I was during the Great Recession. I was a personal banker with Chase Bank. And I had just started maybe a year earlier because I started with Chase. I think it's like March of 2006 as a personal banker. And things were going really well. And when I tell you, when 2007 hit, because as a personal banker, you also work with a business banker. And I remember our business bankers like, man, the market is just really taking a turn for the worse. Now, when these turns for the worse initially occur, when they first come on scene, nobody knows how long it's going to take before things turn themselves around. So let me ask that question. Where were you? If you were born and of age, do you remember where you were when the Great Recession occurred? Because even though I'm in Chicago, this did not just affect Chicago. It did not just affect one city or one state, right? This was for the entire United States. And so our entire country from 2007 to 2009, it there was a shift that happened, right? And we're going to talk about that shift a little bit more. But first, let me do remind you to be sure to connect with me across social media if you have not already done so. You can find and follow me at my name is Tennille, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok. I am there. When you get to YouTube, take a couple extra seconds to go ahead and click that subscribe button. And then if you want to connect with me even further, you can do so by going to my website, which is my name is Tennille.com. That's my name is TONEAL.com. And when you get there, you will be able to not just read about me because you probably don't care about who I am, but what you do care about is how I can help you. And so if you are a woman, if you are creative, that's really what and who I specialize in helping. And so definitely go ahead and visit that, look into those communities, what it would mean to join said communities, and be a part and just really get the most out of it, especially if you're looking for that support system, you're looking for somebody beyond yourself that knows something beyond what you know, and you're looking to connect, then that's exactly where you want to go. So that is my name is Tennille.com. Now, if you have just tuned in, what we're talking about is when life forces you to reset. And so, what I'm doing first is giving some historical context about some of the major times in our history where life has forced us to reset. And then we'll bring it to present day. So we started, and how we got here was because we looked at how, from a financial standpoint, that's normally when your money is affected, when your money is touched and you didn't touch it and you didn't ask for it to be touched, then that's typically the thing that causes for the biggest adjustment. Why? Because money affects every area of our life. It affects whatever we are doing, whether it's eating, whether it's going to the doctor, whether it's going to school, just everyday life. You need money to make it. And so when our finances are affected, then that's going to genuinely affect our entire world. To what extent, it depends on how long our money is being affected. And so we initially touched on the Great Depression, which was from 1929 to 1939. It lasted over the span of a decade. And then from there, the next major issue that we suffered as a country was the Great Recession. that was from 2007 to 2009. And that's where we left off when I was saying, do you remember where you were, what you were doing, what was your life like during that time period? And I was saying how I remember being a personal banker with Chase at that point. And when I started in 2006, there was no forecast that, oh, come 2007, 2008, the world is really about to turn upside down. And most of the time, that's how it is with life. When life is life, and it doesn't give you a warning. Sometimes maybe, but many times it does not say, oh, here I'm coming, here's trouble, I'm coming, and I'm not just going to jump in, jump out. Like I'm going to jump in and I'm going to be here for a long time, right? And so that's what we were dealing with the Great Recession. And so it affected the market. If you were trying to buy a house, you were not doing it. You were not doing it from '07 to '09. And more specifically, if you were trying to sell a house, you definitely were not doing it. Now, I'll say it like this: if you just happen to have money, then many people were buying because of how the market was. People were trying to get rid of their homes, but they couldn't because of how the market was. So it was really bad for people who were trying to sell homes. And then, like I said, it was just a bad time. Period. I definitively I don't remember specifics at that point. I Fortunately, I was still I was a homeowner because I had just recently got married. I got married in '01, so me and my husband, we had our home, and we didn't move from that home for probably about 13, 14 years. So when this time of the Great Recession hit, we were still in our home, and so that was fortunate for us that we were already situated. But the problem sometimes is that trouble will find you before you got an opportunity to get situated. And so you have to be able to know what to do in the during the interim. How do you hold on um, in the during the bad times? And before we go there, I do want to talk about um, when was the last recession? Because I think many of you will probably know. This was relatively recent. This was in 2020. Many of us recall this. And it says the last official recession in the US occurred in early 2020 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This recession lasted, it says, for only 2 months, from March to April of 2020, making it the shortest recession in US history. But let's talk about this, because this recession did not necessarily affect us financially, but it affected our health, right? And whereas when our money was affected and we had to make different types of decisions, because COVID was different. I want to talk about that monster first, and then we'll go back to, just holistically. Matter of fact, we'll bring that in to say, regardless of what type of issue it was, what do we do when life forces that reset? So when COVID hit, and again, this was just 6 years ago, guys, where it was hard when it hit because we never seen anything like it. Maybe if you are, well to, up there, you were maybe around when polio or tuberculosis, or, and again, I'm not sure the actual years that these things came out, influenza, like when these things hit and there was no cure. See, for the most part, if you live in the United States, we're spoiled and we don't know it, because when we get sick with something, we can just run to the doctor real quick, get some type of shot, some type of medication, and then boom, I was sick, now I'm not. Or with this medication, with this shot, within, 2, 3, 5 days, I'll be better. Well, even nowadays, there are a lot of underdeveloped countries. that don't have access to health care like that, that don't have the ability to just bounce back because sickness broke out, right? And the unfortunate truth is, this is what happened to us when COVID hit. I had never seen anything like it before. I remember when it first broke, and it was okay, it's a cold, and it was first supposedly only affecting the elderly, and then it was, well, if you are melanated, you don't have to worry about it. And then we quickly realized that this was affecting everybody. It says March and April were the only 2 months. I would respectfully disagree, because people were dealing with COVID well after March and April. Maybe it hit, and it hit the hardest in March and April. But let me share this. My husband was one of the first that got COVID. He got it in March of 2020 when it was coming out. And it was very difficult because when it first came out, this thing was deadly. Okay. There was no cure, there was no vaccination, there was nothing but deal with it. When you got it, it was, if you know somebody that have it, try to separate yourself as best as you can, because it's highly contagious. It was causing you to lose 20, 30, 50 pounds. Like, it was severe. Okay. And we had children. I say had, but we still have our children, but they were younger 6 years ago. So we basically, there was a separation where I had my children in one house, and I would go back and forth trying to take care of them, but also take care of my husband. So like every day I would go to where he was to try to, feed him, because he wasn't eating. If you remember, COVID had it where you didn't have any appetite, you couldn't smell, there was a loss of smell, and it just was a bad situation. Okay. And so the point that I'm making is, they're saying, oh, well, it was only 2 months. But if we get a record of how many people that was lost during that time period, I guarantee you it feels greater than something that just happened in 2 months. Not only did my husband have COVID, but then the next month, my father in law, his father contracted it. And the unfortunate part with that, because I was front and center for both, I was caregivers for both of them. And, my husband, we tried to nurse him as best we could. We ended up taking him to the hospital. And again, in those days, we remember that you couldn't go to the hospital. They had shut hospitals down. They were treating people, and many times they didn't even know what was going on. And so, I took my husband to the hospital, and that's all I could do was drop him off. And I remember reaching out to my father-in-law, because he hadn't come to church that Sunday, and I drove out to his house. He didn't know that he had it. He just wasn't feeling well. And so I went over there and I cooked for him and things like that. And I was telling him, Dad, you probably need to go to the hospital. And he's like, nah, I'm good. I'm not going to worry about it. And so I had just cooked him like probably about 4 or 5 days worth of food. And I was like, so I'm gonna put this up for you, and then because he knew that his son, my husband, was in the hospital. And so I was and my dad lived in a different city. He lived almost an hour away from us. So it's not like it was easy for me to go back and forth. But the point was, I came while my husband was in the hospital. I came to check on my dad. I cooked for him. And that day, actually, my husband was getting out the hospital, but I didn't know. He had called me. He was like, they're releasing me. They've done, what they can do. So they're releasing me right now. Okay. So I told my father-in-law, my dad, I'm going to check on you tomorrow. Like, I'm going to call you, make sure that you're good, because I need you to eat some of this food that I've cooked or whatever. Because in my head, I'm putting up like 4 or 5 days worth of food so that way I can get my husband, get him situated, and then come back and, check on my dad. That was what I was thinking. Well, I get my husband home. He's situated. The next day, he's situated, but he still has COVID. Okay, he's still severely ill, and so I'm not sure why it is that he was released. I don't remember, but the point is, the next day, I'm calling my father-in-law. I'm calling like two, three times in a row. He doesn't answer, and so now, I'm headed out to where he lived. So it don't matter if, hey, these days of food was supposed to last on 4 or 5 days. You're not answering the phone. So, dude, I'm on my way to go and check to see what's going on. So I take the drive out there, and because the whole time I'm steadily calling, I'm calling, and he was not answering. And so I get to his house, and I'm knocking, like banging on his door, and I wasn't hearing any movement. And so, I'm just about to call 911 when I hear some like fumbling around on the inside. And so I'm hollering through the door, and he finally stumbles to the door to open the door for me. Now, mind you, I was just there. This wasn't even 24 hours ago. And he looked, I knew he was sick, but he didn't look horrible 24 or not even whatever it was, maybe 12, 20 hours ago, prior, the day before. He looked sick, but not like he did standing before me. When he opened the door, he was just sweating severely. I mean, he was drenched. And so I told him, like, Dad, you don't get to say so. You going to the hospital. I said, the only say so you have is whether or not I take you or we call an ambulance. That's really it. And the bottom line is, we got him to the VA because he was a veteran. So we took him to the VA, and I think I still forgot that I'm not going to be able to stay with him. So I had called them and let them know that we were on the way, get there, and I'm getting out the truck, and they was like, no, you can't come in. You've gone as far as you could go. And so they take him in, and that was the last day that I saw him. I think it was like a day or two later, he was gone. And yeah. So yeah, when life forces you to reset. So whether it's severe illness, whether it's, your finances, the point is that you're not going to always be able to predict. You're not going to always be able to prepare, but you still have to figure out how to deal with it. And so, um, when it comes to sickness, illness, disease, death, the there's no quick fix for that. You have to deal with it the best way you know how. So you grieve. If you need to see a therapist, a counselor, you find a healthy way to cope. But financially, let's go back there, because I wasn't, I didn't necessarily think that this is where we were going. But from a financial standpoint, with the Great Depression, the Great Recession, there are going to be some times in your life where things are going to happen that you were not prepared for. Financially, you might work a job, and when you work the job, you're thinking that this is where you're going to be for the next 35, 50 years of your life, right? And again, this is, well, I'll say maybe about 20, 30 years, because nowadays, this generation, was this beta or alpha, whatever generation this is. I think the last generation that thought about having one job for the rest of their lives, If it wasn't the baby boomers, maybe Gen X, because the millennials, I don't even know if millennials um, think about having one job for the rest of their life. But I know, like my father's generation, that was the American dream. We are going to, you go to school, you get a high school education. If you're able to go to college, you do that. But the whole point of getting your education was so that you get a job. You start, even if you got to start at the bottom and work your way up, you do whatever you need to do so that within, 25, 35, 40 years, you're able to retire, you have a pension, because there was a such thing as job security, right? But now things are in such a way where you constantly hear news about funds being depleted from social security. So the people who were working, those who may be in their 60s and 70s now, maybe even older, you know will that money be there? Or say that you're in your 40s and 50s now, and by the time it's time for you to retire, will those funds still be there for you? And so when you look at it from the perspective of, man, I'm doing all of this work so that, I'm working to take care of my country, so to speak, or the people that live therein, so that when it's time for me to retire, that work will then be enough to pay me back and take care of me. And so when that is no longer the case, and you might be like, man, Tennille, I'm not even looking at 30 years out. I'm talking about that I was going to work every day. Think again, you think back to when we just dealt with how all of these different businesses that we didn't think, we lost a lot of major businesses. I'm talking about those brands that have been around forever. And then during this pandemic time, many of them shut down. A lot of plants closed down. And this was nothing to do with workers, anything they done wrong. This wasn't okay because I've gotten 3 warnings. And I think that that's what makes it the most devastating, when you are doing everything right, but the wrong thing still hits. And so I'm simply saying, I want for you too to still have hope. I want for you too to understand that in that moment, it might seem like it's the worst thing ever. But if you keep going, it is going to turn around, because whether you believe it or not, life tends to be cyclical. So it works in a cycle. So it's like we're going to have seasons. The problem is that we don't know how long the seasons will last. We don't know if this will be like how they describe the pandemic as only being 2 months, whether it would be like the Great Recession that was like 2, 3 years, or will it be like the Great Depression that was a decade? We won't even talk about slavery that lasts for centuries. We're not talking about that. We're gonna just keep it with what I talked about, these three. So you don't know when it's going to end. That's what makes it unbearable, because many of us are naturally logical. And so if I can know what to expect, then I can know what to plan for. But if I don't know what to expect, because I didn't know that this Great Recession was going to happen, I didn't know the pandemic was going to happen, but it's still something I have to deal with. So what do I do? How can I still be okay? If you are a person of faith, then the first thing I'm going to tell you is to lean into your faith. Like at the end of the day, the scripture says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thy own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy path. That's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And the point is that if you truly trust God to direct your path, then even in the bad time, He will show you what to do, where to go, who to go to help you in your situation. Like there is always hope in Jesus. Okay, there is always hope. And again, I'm talking to believers. If you are not a believer, then you not only will not understand this, but you're gonna argue me up and down, and you're gonna say it don't make sense, because from a logical standpoint, it may not make sense. But that's the reason why, as a believer, what we have is our faith, and faith and logic, they do not coexist. You cannot have, but because faith doesn't make sense. Believing in something that you don't see, you can't see, but you know is there, that is not logical. So if you are not a believer, this message, this piece of advice is not for you. If you are a believer, then again, I want for you to lean into your faith. I want for you to pray and ask God to give you strength, show you how to get over it, how to get through it. Because at the end of the day, it's not that these situations don't touch us just because we are a believer. It means that we have a different way of dealing with it. When death happens, and trust me, you're talking to somebody who has lost probably 90% or more of the people who were once in my life. So when death happens, it's not that, oh, well, because I'm a believer, I never have to lose anybody. No, it's because I'm a believer, I'm going to be sad, I'm going to cry, because I'm going to miss their physical presence just like everybody else would. But it's the fact that my belief is that one day we will see each other again. My belief is that it's just temporary, that I'm not seeing that person right now, but there will come a day where we will be able to see each other again. So that is hope. Also, I can always feel that person with me. So therefore, I might not actually see them, but I know that they're here, right? So it's the same situation. You have to find, so now this piece of advice is to whomever, believers or non believers. You have to find something that you can focus on that will give you hope in a hopeless situation, so that if you lost your job, okay, did that feel good? No. Was I able to plan for that? No. I didn't know it was happening. But I have to have a made up mind that I'm not going to allow any situation to get the best of me. So let's start there. You have to have that determination. So that's number one. Have the determination that no matter what happens to me, I'm not going to let it take me out. Have the determination that I'm going to swim in a sink or swim situation. I'm going to swim. I don't care if I never had a swimming class in my life. I'm going to figure it out because I refuse to drown. You have to have that mentality, because what is the cliche? That necessity is the mother to all invention. So a lot of times it's in that time when you don't have what you thought you was going to have, when you don't have what you normally had, it's during that time where things are created. Think about, please, almost any invention. It wasn't necessarily created because people just knew or thought, oh, yeah, let's do this. Many times, if you listen to a lot of people that we deem as millionaires or celebrities or whatever, like a lot of the ways that they got their start was because their back was against the wall. So many, and I'm a documentary lover, I watch so many of them, and so many documentaries that I watch, regardless of the industry, regardless of male, female, black, white, any other race, regardless how, oh, they started because that, and they would say, I only had $7.15 left. I only had enough food for this left. Like they purposely put themselves in a situation where if this don't work out, then it ain't there is no option B, right? Like I think Will Smith is one that says, like when they talk about what's your plan B is to make plan A work. So you only have, this is what's going to happen, and I'm not going to stop until this happens. So if life forces you to reset, double down on you. You know what? I'm not going to be hungry. And I'm not telling you to go out and rob no stores or do anything else like that. But maybe this now becomes a time that you start planning your own food, figuring out how to use the flour. I watched a video and it said to make bread, you need flour, yeast, salt, and water. And for the exception of yeast, most people gonna have that in your house. Most people gonna have flour, whether you use regular flour or bread flour. Most people gonna have flour and water in their house. Flour, water, and sugar. You're gonna have that. So if nothing else, we're gonna figure out how to bake some bread. We're gonna become the best bread bakers that we can be. We're gonna figure out how to experiment with it, and then we're gonna become a little bit entrepreneurial with it. Hey, I done ate as much bread as I could. I done shared it with my household, shared it with my family. Now let me see if somebody else on the block like my bread. Oh, you like my bread? Let me see if you're willing to pay me X amount of dollars to eat my bread. You understand what I'm saying? I remember there was a movie, and I want to say it's based on a true story, and it was called Apple Mortgage Cake. And I don't remember who none of the characters were. I just remember the gist of the movie. The lady was about to lose her home, but she knew how to make this. I want to say it was an apple cake, and so she started making cakes because I think she lost her job, and so she started making cakes and she started selling the cakes. And then people got wind of it. And I want to say, like, it was a network that got wind of it. And maybe they brought her on. Now I need to go back and watch this movie. But they brought her on and she started talking about it. And obviously now she's on TV. Now it picks up. So the point that I'm making is, yeah, when life forces a reset, 10 times out of 10, it's going to hurt. 10 times out of 10, in that moment, it's going to feel like it's the worst ever and that there's no way I'm going to make it through. But if you can hold on, if you can find yourself something to focus on, have that spirit of determination that no matter what, I'm going to find a way to swim. Because guess what? Everybody that experienced the depression, they didn't die within the depression. It was hard, but they figured out how to bounce back. I wasn't there during the Great Depression, but I did live during the Great Recession, and I was affected just like everybody else was. You find a way. The point that I'm making is there are things that happen to us. We don't know it's going to happen. We were not planned, or many times you ain't prepared for it to happen. But if you have a determined mindset, if you're like, you know what, this hurt, I know it hurt. Give yourself time to grieve, cry, feel your feelings. Do all of that. But just do not allow your feelings to overtake you, not the negative ones anyway. You got to be able to say, you know what? I'm going to find a way to swim. And even if it's not just for me, I'm going to find a way to swim because I got to be able to teach my babies how to swim. And even if I ain't got no babies right now, one day I want to have babies. So I got to stay around long enough to have the babies to teach them how to swim. But all right, guys, this has been the reset room for today. We've talked about what happens when life forces a reset. I hope you've been able to enjoy it. And don't forget to connect with me. If you enjoyed this podcast, then do connect with me across social media platforms, whether on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, or YouTube. You can find and follow me at my name is Tennille, and you can even go to my website if you're like, man, this girl look like, seem like she know a little bit something, something. I wouldn't mind being connected to her. Then go ahead and go to my website, which is my name is Tennille.com. And there you can see all of the things that I'm doing, from the communities that I've built, the events that we have coming up, the merchandise, apparel, digital products, all of the things that I offer. You'll be able to see them, even down to the services that I provide. So whether as a publisher, as a strategist, or a speaker, you have various ways in which you can work with me. And all of that information is on the website, which is my name is Tennille.com. But again, I appreciate everything that you guys have brought to this podcast today. And if nothing else, you brought yourselves, and truly your presence is a gift. So thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time,